Dyslexia accommodations are not a favor. They're not a loophole, and they're definitely not extra help. If someone has ever implied that dyslexia accommodations give your child an unfair advantage, I want you to listen closely to this episode. We're sharing what accommodations are, why they matter in middle school and in high school, so that by the end of this episode, you'll know exactly what to ask for, what actually works to foster independence, and how to stop second-guessing yourself in 504 school meetings. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Tracy Young, OG tutor extraordinaire, founder of theliteracykeys.com, and most importantly, mom of a dyslexic daughter. Welcome to my podcast, where you'll discover ways to unlock your child's reading potential. I'll share tips, strategies, and war stories that have happened along the way, because everyone deserves to be able to read. So let's get started. Hello, and welcome to the Literacy Keys podcast. I'm Tracy Young, your host, and today's episode continues our conversation about dyslexia accommodations. Now, last week, I started discussing dyslexia accommodations in elementary school. When I first decided to talk about the topic, I planned on including everything for elementary, middle, and high school students in one episode. But when I started recording the episode, it was way too much information. So I made an executive decision to break it all up into 2 episodes. Now, if you haven't listened to the first part, I encourage you to check it out. Also, there's a checklist for common dyslexia 504 accommodations that you can download, and I'll provide details for that resource a little bit later in the episode. In this episode, I'm not going to go into as much background information as I did in the last episode, but there are a few elements that are worth discussing again. Let's start with, what are dyslexia accommodations? So in a nutshell, accommodations are adjustments of how a student learns or demonstrates that learning, but it doesn't change what they're expected to learn. Now, the International Dyslexia Association defines accommodations as changes in the way students access information. They do not change academic expectations. That is called a modification. I like to think of accommodations as removing barriers for students with dyslexia so they can demonstrate their true understanding of the material. Remember, the purpose of these supports are to level the playing field and ensure kids with dyslexia have equal access to learning and can shine academically. Now, let's also go on the record as saying that dyslexia accommodations do not provide students with an unfair advantage. I'm going to say that again. Dyslexia accommodations do not provide students with an unfair advantage. I mention this because, unfortunately, too many folks still have this mindset that accommodations are unfair if a student isn't severely dyslexic. I mention this because I personally came up against this mindset when requesting timing accommodations for my daughter. They pointed to the fact that she was passing her New York State exams and couldn't possibly need more time. The administrators at the school really believed that granting her extra time or timing accommodations would be creating an unfair advantage. They ignored the data about her processing speed and the fact that her performance deteriorated faster than average over time. They rationalized that all students get tired when taking an exam. And you wonder why I became passionate about helping other parents? Okay, so I've set the stage to talk about dyslexia accommodations as students transition from elementary grades into middle and high school. You're going to want to evaluate the accommodations according to each child's need and level of independence. I say this because independence is ultimately the goal. Ideally, you as a parent want to reach the point at which your child, the student, independently knows what they need to access the information and demonstrate their knowledge. You're not always going to be there for them. Teachers and aides will not always be there. The goal is for your child to know what they need and how to ensure that they can access it. So let's dive into middle school, where the academic demands really start to increase. As I just mentioned, everything begins to change in middle school. Students go from a nurturing environment of one classroom teacher to a bustling schedule of multiple teachers, more homework, and higher expectations for independence. For kids with dyslexia, this transition can be challenging. Add raging preteen hormones to the mix, and it's a bumpy ride for everyone in the family. Having the right dyslexia accommodations in place will help them successfully navigate this academic landmine. Dyslexia doesn't magically disappear in the sixth grade, so things like extra time, audiobooks, and note taking assistance remain very important. However, as coursework becomes more complex, new accommodations often are needed. And I'm going to talk about specific areas. The first one being assistive technology and tools. Middle school is a great time to introduce tools that foster independence. For reading, many students use text to speech software or apps to read textbooks and novels aloud. Chrome has a text to speech extension that can be downloaded and installed from the browser. Schools often have access to libraries from Learning Ally or Bookshare, which provide audiobooks of textbooks and literature for students with dyslexia. I believe Learning Ally is free if your child has an IEP or a 504. You have to register with them and provide the paperwork. Check with their website for the specifics. These accommodations ensure your child is accessing grade level content with oral comprehension. It also prevents a student from shutting down because the amount of text is overwhelming, and I've seen it time and time again. In fact, my own daughter would get overwhelmed just seeing a 200-page novel that she had to read for a class. This brings us to the assisted technology for writing. Does your child need dictation software? It's commonly called speech to text, and it can be a powerful accommodation in middle school if typing or handwriting is extraordinarily difficult. Having this dyslexia accommodation allows a student to dictate their thoughts and have the computer convert it to text. Google Docs has a voice to text feature under the Tools tab, but you want a specific accommodation listed on your child's 504 plan to ensure that they can use this feature at school and on their school computer. Consider word prediction software and spell check. The algorithm suggests words as a student types. All of these technologies help the student begin to develop ways to minimize their reading and writing challenges. You, as a parent, want to ensure that any assistive technology and device your child needs are included on their IEP or 504. You'll also want to request training for your child on how to use the technology. It's like riding a bike. The first time is wobbly, but they'll eventually get it with practice. Unfortunately, I've seen too many schools include assistive technology in a student's plan and forget to teach the child how to use it. Hence, they don't use it because they get frustrated that it doesn't do what it's supposed to. Don't let that happen to your child, and make sure training is included as an accommodation. Now let's talk about another subject area, note-taking and organization. With multiple classes and teachers, staying organized becomes tougher. Any hair that you still have may be pulled out in frustration as everything becomes a jumbled mess. Note-taking is a common dyslexia accommodation for 504 plans at this age. Teachers can provide class notes, outlines, and slide printouts to the student. For example, a history teacher could give an outline of the day's lecture or a copy of the slideshow that they talked about in class. The goal of this dyslexia accommodation is to prevent the student from missing key points in a lecture because all of their brain power is focused on copying the information, or rather, trying to copy the information. If the school is unwilling to provide formal notes, consider allowing the student to take photos of the whiteboard or homework assignments written on a board to ensure that they are error free. Now, remember, many schools are going phone free, so this absolutely needs to be included in a plan to allow your child access to a camera device. For organizational needs, graphic organizers can be a beneficial dyslexia accommodation. Using mind maps to organize ideas when writing an essay is a great tool to consider. I recorded an entire episode on mind maps that you can check out, and I'll put the link in the show notes. You might want to request templates for writing assignments to reduce the load on your child's working memory and help them structure their work. Organizational issues are referred to as executive functioning, and they can become part of common dyslexia accommodations at this age. This can include breaking long term projects into smaller deadlines, having check ins mid project, or using an assignment planner with teacher check ins. For example, if a science project is due in a month, you may want the teacher to check in midpoint at the 2-week mark to review the progress done to date and adjust as needed. This minimizes last minute crises, which happen when reading and writing tasks are underestimated. And we definitely know that happens all the time in middle school. The third area I want to focus on are testing accommodations and grading. By middle school, tests and quizzes are more frequent and they start to become higher stakes. Standard dyslexia accommodations can include extended time for in class tests and exams. If reading is a barrier, your child's plan can include oral reading of test questions. Many dyslexic students also get a separate quiet location for test taking. This helps students concentrate and not feel rushed or self conscious. Another common accommodation is not penalizing for spelling errors in writing assignments. A book report might be graded on understanding of the book and effort rather than taking points off for every single misspelled word. You might want to consider specifying alternatives to traditional bubble tests, such as an oil presentation or a creative project. Remember, middle school can be a tricky time socially and academically, but with the right dyslexia accommodations, students can flourish. It's a time to encourage independence while still communicating with your child's teachers. Now let's focus on high school, where we prepare for the leap into adulthood and higher education. High school is the home stretch of the K through 12 education. For students with dyslexia, it's a time to maximize support and build independence for the future. The curriculum is more demanding than ever. The novels are complex in English. Lengthy read assignments happen in history and other subjects. Foreign language classes are required. State graduation exams are there. And high stakes tests like the SAT and the ACT roll around. It may sound daunting, but with the right accommodations, students with dyslexia can not only keep up, but they can truly excel. So now let's talk about dyslexia accommodations in high school and consider how you as a parent can help your teen take the reins of self-advocacy. Advance assistive technology and alternative media. So by high school, most students with dyslexia will be regularly using some form of assistive technology. Audiobooks, text-to-speech apps remain critical accommodations. If your school uses Google Classroom, make sure your child knows how to use the built in accessibility features. Speech to text is extremely valuable for lengthy writing assignments like research papers. You want to evaluate dyslexia friendly fonts like Arial or Verdana, or a specialized one like Dyslexia. Some students find it easier to read using a larger print or a different font. You can request that teachers provide digital versions that the students can adjust the fonts on. There's another tool that high schoolers can benefit from, and it's called a Smart Pen. Using a live scribe pen or an app to record class lectures can allow students to fine tune their class notes and ensure key points from a lecture are included in their notes. So basically, by high school, the goal is for students to know what tools help them and have them readily available. Remember, if it's not included on the plan, then theoretically it doesn't exist for your child. So having everything listed on your child's plan ensures that there isn't any discussion about access. It also provides the background for higher educational requests. Now let's talk about another hurdle that needs to be overcome at this age: curriculum and testing accommodations. So many students have a foreign language requirement. This can be an issue for some dyslexic students. Remember, dyslexia can affect letter sound patterns, which need to be learned for a new language. You have different options. If your child wants to learn the foreign language, consider accommodations like reduced emphasis on spelling in the foreign language class. Another option is to take American Sign Language instead of Spanish or French. And finally, there might even be a foreign language waiver available. You need to talk to your child and to the school to decide which option is best for your family. At this stage, it's critical to ensure accommodations are granted for college entrance exams, advanced placement, AP, International Baccalaureate, IB. If your child is taking any of them, then you want to make sure that guidance or the appropriate person is putting in the requests at the appropriate time for your child. The process for the SATs and ACT accommodations typically involve applying with documentation of the disability and proof of accommodations in school. As a parent, you can initiate that process with your child's guidance counselor. Let's move on to organization and time management. So, high school students juggle multiple classes, extracurricular activities, and some even juggle job responsibilities. As I mentioned earlier, these organizational and time management issues are called executive function. Don't get me started on why we have to give everything a fancy name. Suffice to say, organizational and time management issues can go hand in hand with dyslexia. Accommodations here in high school might include use of an organizational app or digital planner and having weekly check ins with a resource room advisor to plan the week's workload. A resource room accommodation can provide additional support in a multitude of areas. All right, now we're going to move on to a really important area: self advocacy. High schoolers are learning to advocate for themselves. That said, your child might have mixed feelings about their accommodations. Some teens fully embrace them, while others feel a stigma and start to resist using them. They want to fit in and think or believe that accommodations separate them from their peers. This is an important conversation that needs to happen. It can be helpful to share that accommodations level the playing field. If appropriate, share stories of older students who used accommodations and went on to college. If higher education is the goal, start building your child's self advocacy skills now in high school. Because once they enroll in college, students are expected to request accommodations and communicate their needs. You can start by having your teen practice explaining their dyslexia and what helps them. Consider having them attend part of their 504 plan meeting. Explaining their needs to the committee can build the confidence they'll need beyond high school. So, with the appropriate dyslexia accommodations, a student can tackle honors classes, write insightful essays, and show their strengths. As a parent, you continue to advocate, but you start stepping back so your teen can step forward. There's no expiration on accommodations. Your child can use them on the first day of kindergarten and on the last day of senior year. In fact, 504 plans continue into college. Universities must provide accommodations under the American Disabilities Act, ADA. So before we end this episode, I want to take a moment and remind listeners that there's no limit to the number of accommodations a student can have in a plan. If someone says differently, simply ask the person to show you the written regulations or law stating that the number of accommodations is capped at a certain number. Trust me, they won't be able to. I encourage you to build a positive relationship with your child's educators. When they see that everyone is on the same team, it usually leads to better consistency and cooperation overall. Now, we've covered a lot in the past 2 episodes surrounding dyslexia accommodations. I want you to walk away feeling empowered as a parent. At the beginning of this episode, I mentioned a dyslexia accommodations checklist that I created for my listeners. This is a parent-friendly list of common accommodations for students with dyslexia. Think of it as a menu of options that you can check off and use as a starting point when working with your child's school. Not every accommodation is right for every child. The Dyslexia Accommodations checklist is downloadable, and a link can be found in the show notes. So head over to the show notes to find the link, and please share this episode with another parent. So that's it for me. Until next week, I bid you adieu. Well, that's a wrap. Thank you for listening to the Literacy Keys podcast. Follow us on social media, and most importantly, tell a friend. See you next week.